Welcome back to the Portswigger Lab. In this one, we'll be taking a look at XML, external entity injection. Also, before I get really into this, I want to mention that this is almost like a what you need to know for OSCP video, because this is one of the web vulnerabilities that you will encounter on the OSCP. And if you know how to identify this and exploit this, it's going to result in you being able to root more boxes on there. So definitely pay attention to this if OSCP is something on your radar. So this one is pretty good to know, and I've definitely seen it in the wild quite a few times. And initially this can be kind of tricky, but let's just start with the very basics, right? What is XML, right? So you might be familiar with HTML. I'm sure pretty much everyone watching is, right? And that's the hypertext markup language. Well, XML is the extensible markup language. And basically the difference is, if you think about an HTML file, right? There's predefined tags, like you have HTML tags, head tags, body tags, script tags, paragraph tags, all that, right? And they're predefined. But with XML, you actually define almost all of the tags yourself. And so this can be very useful for transporting data, right? So if you think about JSON, right? It's basically fulfilling a lot of the same needs as XML, right? Where you can have your own your JSON fields that you define, and then you have values in those fields. Well, it's a lot like that. So as you see here, you got a stock check tag, product ID tag, and these were defined in the DTD, which is the document type definition. So also comparing back to HTML, you're probably familiar with this doc type word that you see at the top of your HTML document. Well, there'll be a doc type, and you specify the doc type. And this is where we can inject our entity. We'll talk about the actual entity injection here in a second. But first of all, it's important to know the normal use case for this, right? You pretty much would use it in almost all the scenarios that I can think of that you would use JSON for. It's just that some of these technologies expect XML instead of JSON. Some of them support either XML or JSON, but a lot of times when you're talking APIs, if you think about REST APIs, most of them are JSON based, but definitely if you're talking about SOAP APIs, then those are they expect XML. So think about it as an alternative to JSON. In a lot of cases, it was a legacy way that we used to transfer data before JSON became as popular as it is, but it is still used today for a variety of technologies. So you don't think that it's like not seen in the wild anymore. It's definitely there. Like I said, with SOAP APIs and things like that, especially, but not exclusively. So here you have, what is an entity, right? So we're talking about exploiting external entities. Well, of course, first we need to know what an entity is. So I'm not going to read off all of this, obviously. What I will say is I'm going to give you the cliff notes of all of this stuff. If you really want to dive deep into this stuff, check out the Portswigger Lab, the Portswigger Academy. They did a fantastic job explaining all this stuff, giving you hands-on practice for it. But these videos, the use case for them is going to be if you want a sort of Cliff Notes version of it and you want to see me walk through some of the labs, then that is the purpose of these videos. So just to give you the Cliff Notes on this then, is that essentially, fundamentally, XML has a lot of flaws just in how it was created, let's just say. And one of those flaws are allowing you to pull in these entities, and it's kind of dumb in how it just will run it, without really checking, without really validating much. So sometimes the things that it pulls in and allows you to do might not even be needed for your application. And if you allow it to use this functionality, it could, result in some vulnerabilities here. So with the external entities, right, the way they describe the entities is a way of presenting an item of data within an XML document instead of using data itself. So various entities are built in specification to the XML language. So for example, you have like these entities for less than, greater than, right? So you can represent meta characters, but you can also do so much more than that, as we'll see. So in the document type definition in the DTD is where we can specify our own entities. So these entities are things that we can custom create. So in this case here, we're defining an entity and we're calling it my entity. And the value is just this string here. But we can make the value of it a file, like say, hey, path to file, like XXE password or something. So, right, we can get some file inclusion, right? We can get some file read, so we can read some sensitive files on a system potentially by exploiting the external entity injection, which we're going to go into the injection part in a second. I just want to show you, here's how they're setting it up. And we can, in many cases, read files on the system. And then in some cases, you might be able to make external calls to other systems. So this could even result in server-side request forgery, SSRF, in some cases, as we'll see as well. And I have seen some cases where we're able to get code execution by chaining this as well. Now, going to this page here, right? Basically these arise because they're allowing you to use these external entities, and like I said, they're not very smart. They're just kind of running it. And so there's a number of different ways that you can exploit this depending on this specific vulnerability, XXE vulnerability that you're looking at, right? In most cases, you're able to retrieve files, and in some, you can even perform SSRF, make out-of-band requests, and all kinds of stuff, right? So here's what a more full-featured exploit looks like here. So you have where it's defined at the top here, right? And then inside the actual XML, you'll see a call to your entity. So this is key, right? Here's defining it, but here's where it's actually being called. So in this case, they're defining an entity, and the variable basically is called XXE, and here they're referencing that entity with the ampersand and then the name, which is XXE, right? So once this is called, it will dump the contents of XXE password. So you will see that in the inner, in between this product ID tag here. That's where you'll actually see it on the page. So wherever you would normally see the value of the product ID, instead you'll see the contents of XXE password in this case. So you can even see that here. This is what the output would look like if it was successful. And so obviously we're going to do a lab where we're just exploiting it in the basic case, right? Just to retrieve files. And here's a note here. We'll read this one. With real-world vulnerabilities, there will often be a large number of data values. Yeah. So you'll probably not just have one or two markups here. You'll have like a ton. Generally, you can put it wherever you want to put it in the document. But yeah, you got to reference it. And then we'll move on to actually how we can chain this into SSRF. So basically, all that comes down to is instead of a file, we can say, make this HTTP request to the site here. And if you have Brit Pro, this is even easier to do. If you don't, you can still do it. You just got to do it in a different means. But sometimes you'll have blind XXE where you won't get the data back. Like in this scenario, we were able to get the data back. We're able to see the file, right? But you're not always able to read the file. Sometimes it'll be blind, but you're still able to execute stuff. Like especially with SSRF, when you chain it into SSRF, you might be able to make it do an out-of-band HTTP request, but you won't see in the response anywhere that it made that request. That's where especially having Brit Pro can help you, but you can also set up your own servers and stuff to get that data, or even make use of some of the error message stuff that we're going to see here later on. But yeah, there's ways to get some information when you're dealing with blind XXE. And this one was pretty interesting as well, a hidden attack surface. So, the obvious place to look for XML, like how do you identify it, right? Normally it's in especially when there's file upload where it expects you to upload an XML document, or there's some kind of SOAP API at play. those are the obvious places, right? But sometimes you might have, you might submit some user data, right? You as the user might submit some data, and in the back end, there might be like a SOAP request being made. It's converting it into an XML document, parsing that document, and then doing something with it, right? So that's a case where you might be able to use this XInclude thing that we're going to be looking into, you know, like so, and actually get it to, you know, get some file read off of that, right? And the tricky part with this is we can't actually write the write to the actual XML document that it creates, because that's happening on the back end, but we can control some of the input. So there is a XInclude attack. You know, we can try this payload to still get the exploit working for us. And like I said, file upload, very popular place to look for this stuff. Also, this is the content type for that you could use. You could use either of these in many cases, I believe is what it's saying. And yeah, so that's pretty much the overview of XXE. In the next video in this series, we're going to be tackling the labs. There's not too many labs here on this one, but hey, like I said, this is a very important one to know because you'll see it in the real world, in the wild, and you'll see it on OSCP. So that's why I really wanted to prioritize covering this one. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you have, be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and hit the like button as well. Help me out in the algorithms. And yeah, if you are eager to learn more about these web vulnerabilities, check out the videos on screen right now, the Portswigger Web Academy videos. We're building out this playlist. Hope you guys are enjoying it so far. I'll see you guys right over in those videos. Thanks for watching.